What I did want to talk about is the road to Silicon Valley, or when startups come to the US, and also investors come to the US. And it could be the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm based in New York and San Francisco and Poland, finished Harvard Law, and I work mostly with foreign companies or foreign investors. So just, wanted to share sort of best practices with you. Um, it's not an opinion piece or an editorial. Um, I'm more than happy to talk about factual circumstances, but I can't name people or events. But yeah, so Silicon Valley, it's a physical place, but it's also a certain mentality and culture. So when you are doing deals, you have to think about Silicon Valley as a geography, but also as a business culture, and you'll be dealing with different investors here in Europe who do fit the Silicon Valley mentality. So a lot of people think the Silicon Valley is like the HBO show. Unfortunately, it's not. It's very funny. It's a pastiche comedy, but it's more like the movie The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. If you haven't seen The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, I recommend it. It's about three guys looking for gold in the wild, wild west, and there's Clint Eastwood, and then there's another actor, and like they don't match. And that's sort of startups and venture capitalists, and they're together trying to look for that pot of gold. We're in Hungary right now, and you might say, "Oh, I'm not going to the valley. It doesn't matter. I'm going to be a local startup." Well, unfortunately, the digital economy, all of the roads to the digital economy lead to Silicon Valley. So whatever happens there has an effect here. Terms that are standard there, like vesting, are important here. So you really need to understand what's going on in the valley. It's also interesting because I lived in New York and moved to the Valley myself about 3 years ago, and I thought it's all PR, and you can build a company somewhere else, but there is a really high concentration of really smart people who have exited capital and ideas. So it's interesting. And the other thing, you can read about this, surf the web, I can tell you some of the stuff, but it's a really complex system based on trust and standardization. And like the more standardized and more trustworthy you are, the better. And I can't stress that culture is important. And it's not only about being classy and having class, but it's understanding the business culture and the digital mindset. Okay, so this is sort of a couple of thoughts about the Silicon Valley business culture. It's a problem solution method. So if you only have a problem method and like you create problems for the company, the investors, and the other founders, you're not going to succeed. It's about identifying opportunities, so it's very opportunistic, and it's also about targeting customers. So you have to think the culture of service, and I think in Hungary you have a culture of serving and focus on the customer, and it's also about they like small. So small is good. So if it doesn't matter if you're a Polish company, a Hungarian company, Estonian company, small is good because they believe they can grow small into big. So it's a thing you should focus on. So the good. So one of the most important things is getting your homework done. A lot of people don't do their homework when they get to, or they're starting to think about scaling or flipping their companies. So do you need to be in the valley? It's it depends. I think yes, because this is where everything is happening in the digital world. It's super important to listen to feedback. As an Eastern European myself, I know listening is not our forte, and like we really need to do that. And the Valley is all about getting feedback from mentors, advisors, from your customers, and doing the quick iterations. So there's no secret handshake in the Valley. So it's not that you're how should I say it? I'm going to get in bad trouble now. That you're friends with Orban or Rachel Orban, his daughter, and doors open. You really have to work hard, and there's no formula for success. So, for example, the Prezi model might not work for you. You have to really find your plan and how to do it. And good founders that are successful in the Valley have product market fit, and they ask for help, and that's like super important. In Eastern Europe, we really don't feel keen about asking for help, and there's not a culture of asking for help. And in the Valley in California, it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't mean you're inadequate and you're not successful, but people know that they don't know everything. And the other thing, this is a thing that's super important. A lot of founders from Eastern Europe and also investors think that doing a startup or running a venture fund means lifetime employment, getting a management fee out of running a Jeremy fund, or being employed by the startup. You should be focusing on the exit and not about getting a salary and growing your equity. So the good. So I listed some metrics that are important. So if you have a good team, as Laszlo said, it's a thing people look at. Traction. Traction is very important. So if you have growth rates of 20% per month or 7% per week, you're going to get noticed. If you have an investor from Europe, that's a good signal that you can send out to investors or accelerators in Europe. And the idea has to be, really special. So when you're going to the Valley, I would divide it in two phases. One is, the exploration and learning as much as you can, and trying to figure out what the hell is going on. It's like, super small, but you need to learn, talk to people, and they're going to give you advice how to scale. Some of it might be stupid, but it's a good thing to gather that information, come back to Hungary, realize it, and then come back again to fundraise. So don't go to the Valley just to fundraise, because you're going to fail. The Eastern European founders that go to the Valley to ask for advice are the guys who usually get funding. So why go? It's for customers and mentorship, and not the financing. And you need to leverage the assets that are there. So don't be afraid to call up Google, Facebook, call everybody, and try to get as much exposure. The other thing, Americans, and especially people in California, like simple. So have only plan A, and pitch them one thing. If you're waste somebody's time for 30 minutes and tell them, oh, blah, 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 company does this, and then, but I have another company that I wanted to pitch, that's failure. The other thing, in terms of simplicity and keeping things simple, is the cap table. There are huge issues with Eastern European companies and their cap tables. The cap tables don't work, and if the investor takes a lot of shares, probability of succeeding in the Valley gets smaller, or with European venture funds that work with the Silicon Valley mentality. So cap tables have to be super pristine, and I think Laszlo can help with that, and I can help with that, but it's super important. So the good, don't forget. So everybody's building network companies. So we're in the internet business. It's about connecting the dots, but a lot of people forget about the network, and I'm going to mention some things. When you meet people, it's good to follow up, and most Eastern European founders never follow up. So you meet someone and then things get cold. You need to follow up, and follow up on LinkedIn, but don't just send. I want to add you to my professional network. Just write to them like a small sentence, something. And like the other thing is the power of thank you. Americans are obsessed about like thanking each other. Thanksgiving, gratitude, and like we never like thank anything. So it's like an Eastern European thing. We need to thank more, and especially people for their time, for an introduction. Okay, the bad. I think there's something called Eastern European syndrome, and starts, I don't know where it starts. It might be in the water, but it's like in the Baltics. It goes for Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. Maybe Hungary is the exception, and then goes for the Balkans. But so the syndrome is it's not big enough. If you're building a company, usually those companies are not big enough. It has to be like big. So big exits, and like people in the valley are interested in a company that's going to exit at 100 million. So at minimum. So you really need to pitch the story and like yourself believe that you're building $100 million company. The other thing, too late, too slow. So I saw a version of WhatsApp here in the region a couple of years ago, and I also saw Waze. And because they were in the region, they weren't going fast enough, or they weren't going fast enough. So you really need to be fast, and being there helps you accelerate because it's like huge competition. And like here, in Eastern Europe, it's Wednesday, the weekend starts, you go to Balaton, and or you really need to work hard and like go fast. One thing about rule breaking. So like I think there's this misperception that the Valley is about rule breaking, and therefore us Eastern Europeans as the rule breakers fit in. There's the Silicon Valley rule breaking, and then the Eastern European rule breaking and not following instructions. So follow instructions and don't break rules. Yeah, I can talk about that later. And networking doesn't mean not working. Like you go to events, maybe a meetup, and you see them in San Francisco or in Menlo Park or Palo Alto. So there's a meetup, and there's like these two white dudes in the corner, and there's a probability that they're like from Eastern Europe because like they don't network. They're just standing there waiting for someone to come up to them, and like you really need to come up to people and like talk to them and listen, ask them questions. Don't like tell them your life story, but just be brief. Ask them how you can help them. Yeah, so networking. And the final thing here, the guys who like make the big exits are those who can recognize things and don't replicate things. So it's new ideas versus cloning, looking for similarities or patterns. So you shouldn't be looking for patterns. The other thing, if you just have a product with some features, that's you're not going to succeed. So I see a lot of Eastern Europeans that just have a product. They don't have a business or a company. So it's difficult if you don't have like these three components. So it gets worse. So a lot of Eastern Europeans just come to the Valley because they heard that it's easy to get money, and it's also like investors and startups. So it's not easy to get money. It's super hard. You're like competing with the best, and it might be easier to get funded here. But the other thing, Americans love dreams. So you gotta tell them about your big dream. And in Europe, people don't invest in dreams and don't talk about them. And it has to be, your dream has to be disruptive. It has to be big. It can't be just, a small dream, from Edgar or something like that. The other thing, Eastern Europeans never build FOMO. So FOMO, fear of missing out. And like it's so important. You gotta like tell people that you're the best thing that happened to the world after Viagra. It has to be like awesome. And then a lot of founders and come to the Valley and they're not committed to this project, and they just show up, they hang out for 3 weeks, drink some lattes, take some meetings, and then they go back. If you're investing time and money to go, just be committed, and don't give excuses like and these are quotes. Silicon Valley is too hard, we should focus on the European Union, or we can't replicate Silicon Valley, stay in Europe, or we don't have the capital and the entrepreneurs here in Europe. So like, no, you have to be a winner, and like you can't have these excuses. And like if someone in the Valley hears excuses, they just like they don't want to talk to you and they shut down. So the ugly. So it's not bad, but just ugly. I mentioned that people don't have an idea why they come to the Valley. The pay it forward culture. So like I do a favor to someone, and like I make an introduction. It would be nice to get a thank you or an invitation for coffee or like some way of like appreciation. It's not that people do things for free. There's no free lunch, especially in the Valley. But you have to pay it forward with something. If you're a dev shop and you're looking for clients, offer something in exchange. And pay it forward doesn't mean qui pro quo. So it doesn't mean I scratch your back and you scratch my back, the Hungarian way. It doesn't work like that. You can't be insular and hang out with Eastern Europeans. You got to hang out with Americans and like tell them about yourself. You have to be coachable. So like have the capacity to get criticism, and good and bad. And a lot of Eastern Europeans just shut down when they hear something bad about their company, and it's just really bad. And then don't try to translate your Eastern European reality or your Hungarian way of doing business into American or California. It just doesn't work. You're going to get in trouble. And then the ugliest one's constant introductions. So like I'm running my law firm, and like someone calls me nonstop. Hey, can you introduce me to Sequoia? Can you introduce me to someone in Andreessen? Can you do something? And it's venture guys have a small attention span, and like people don't want to burn their attention. So like I can't send nonstop introductions for you. That's your job. Okay. So Q&A. P.S. You are the good, the better, and the prettiest. And I wish you success and build great companies that succeed in Hungary and succeed in the Valley. Thank you.